Hi, everyone. Welcome along to the next edition of Precursive Perspective. I'm delighted today to be joined by Mike Dohrmann, who is the managing partner. Hi, Mike. Thanks for waving.
Jonathan.
Of Atlantic Technologies. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us, where in the world are you today?
I am based out of my home office in Denver, Colorado, and left the UK, I guess 3.5 months ago, thinking I was coming back for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Because you commute once a month, don't you? So
about that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for coming on. So in these conversations, Mike, as you know, I spend some time speaking with executives and leaders of a range of different companies, technology businesses, professional services organizations, really about how they're navigating this new remote reality that we're all working in, and exploring some of the topics in and around it. So let's just begin with a bit of background to you and Atlantic Technologies. So for those of us joining today, give us a little bit of background on Atlantic and the scope of your role there, and then perhaps a little bit about your career prior to that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So Atlantic Technologies is a Salesforce, Oracle, and Tableau consulting firm that's based out of Milan, Italy. I am a managing partner along with one of my partners, Fred Walker, in the UK. Yeah. And yeah, so we've been in business for over 20 years. We're the largest platinum partner in Italy outside of the Big Four. And then we've done a lot of work in JD Edwards, Oracle, and then Tableau, which has fit nicely with the turn of events in the last year.
Yeah.
I actually, prior to Atlantic, came from Blue Wolf, which was acquired by IBM, and spent 5 years there as an associate partner and led the team of engagement managers for the United Kingdom. So we had a book of business of about 100 million in direct revenue for IBM.
Yeah.
And kind of at the end of I've been in the Salesforce space for about 15 years. Fred and I moved over to Atlantic at the same time, and originally had grand ideas to go out and do something on our own in the UK. And we met Marcelo De Rosa, who is the CEO of Atlantic, to see if he would be willing to, invest in us. And he wanted to. And then just a little bit before we were going to kind of get moving, he said, "Hey, I have a better idea. How about you, under my banner, Atlantic Technologies, get the UK up and running for us and start a practice there." And that's kind of how that came to fruition. So in the UK, we're really focusing on Salesforce and surrounding technologies and applications as a platinum partner.
Well, I'm glad we got Fred's name in, because he'd be super disappointed if he
100%.
All right, and Marcelo, if you're watching, I wore this shirt for you. So cool. So I think, obviously the world's radically changed since when you and I first met a number of years ago. Talk to us a little bit about how you guys at Atlantic had to adapt given the new circumstances.
Yeah, it was. I run the UK, and one of the first things that I had to do on the beginning of March was decide, my family's based here. How do I need to go back? Okay, I'm going to go back. And then it became, how do we work that, not just for me, but then, with all of our employees, because they're dispersed around the UK, with everybody that came into an office like anyone else. Yeah, I mean, we were already using Zoom, I think, just for client meetings.
Yep.
And other remote working tools. So it changed very, very quickly in terms of people getting onto video calls, which is key. I think that face-to-face interaction is what people need out of the gate.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that we dealt with it immediately, and I know a lot of other companies have, and I'm sure we stole it from somebody, but we started like quiz nights and Zoom drinking and just things to try to keep employees engaged. Those have come off, a little bit, other than the quiz night, just because of the competitive spirit of our consultants. But and then we took some other measures in realizing that people were going to be from home. We came up with a budget and allotted a certain amount of money for all of our employees to purchase home office equipment, which might be, whatever they needed. Some people didn't want a chair. Some people wanted a desk or, a new monitor or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was, I think, pretty organic, like every other company. It wasn't really something that any of us
No.
had any foresight into. So it was a little bit from the hip, but we've hired enough people that we trust them, so it was never an issue of like getting their work done. And it just became a way of establishing ways of working with our leadership team and then cascading that down to our employees. So even now we've opened the office,
Okay.
but we built an application on Salesforce
Yeah.
just internally for tracking who wants to go into the office,
Right.
and tracking things like, we're asking our employees that want to go in that they don't take public transportation right now, that we cap it at about 4 or 5 employees at the office at a time. They have to wear face masks. And they basically sign all this in Salesforce.
Yeah.
But we've also, like in the UK, we've extended our timeline for working from home indefinitely because it has worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's a little tip for you, because we have our own Wine Wednesdays, which is very popular at Precursive. So there's a game called Fibbage. I will send it to you, and basically what happens is it's like a little game show online, and you'll have a statement, and you've got to insert a word and get everyone to believe your lie, and you get points.
I
So
like that.
it's very amusing. So I will send you.
It's a very English word.
Yes,
it sounds very English. Yeah.
Well, it's an American game because it's an American accent on the game. So Fred will love it. So looking at your customers then and your clients, you serve a range of mid-market and enterprise manufacturing businesses, technology companies, biotech, healthcare. So what have you seen in terms of the changes for them and really how they're adapting to this and the change that they want to achieve?
Yeah, it's been interesting. The clients that we've been working with, it's as if, and I'll take this outside of the manufacturing clients, which have been a little bit different because they've been impacted more than some of the technology clients that we work with.
Yeah.
The technology clients we work with, it's as if the infrastructure was already in place to handle this type of crisis, and so for them it became crack on. Now we don't have to waste any time, and so I think what they're trying to, two of the clients we have right now, I think they view this as a time that moving along in a much more rapid and iterative fashion makes the most sense now. So what we're seeing is, companies that traditionally what might have been more, and I hate the word agile, but where they really take a big bang or big picture approach are starting to become more receptive to iterating in an agile fashion, just because there's, you don't have to coordinate, a huge meeting space and fly a bunch of people out, and people are now accustomed to working on virtual whiteboards and via, Zoom and other, audio visual technologies. So the impact for our clients and the change that they want is really, let's move forward. Let's do it a little bit faster than we have in the past.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean,
so
it's been very interesting.
So the speed of engagements can actually potentially increase for you guys.
I think ironically, that's what's happened where, I think when we started out from the offset, we thought this was going to have an impact on how fast we could actually accomplish work with our clients. And it's actually turned out that we can do things potentially a little bit faster because we don't have to wait in terms of making people travel and on our side and on their side. It just comes together. And obviously we don't care about how we dress for anything anymore. So
yeah, well, no, you've always been a fan of hoodies, so you live your dream. So, and then with respect to like how you've been in consulting a long time across a range of businesses, how do you see this impacting the consultancy market and that environment, like longer term?
Well, I think it does a couple things. I think that first, it opens up the door for resourcing more so than we've had before. So, as it stands, most, primarily in a London office, you're hiring London talent or people in the surrounding areas.
Yep.
with not a lot of people commuting in. And I think what we've proven, we actually onboarded a new employee 1 month into the crisis. And it worked. And it worked well. None of us, other than his interviews back in like February, none of us had ever met him in person. None of us have worked with him in person. So I think from a consulting standpoint, it's opening up the potential to hire people that are outside of London or, you know, outside of a country in particular. So you can start attracting the best talent from almost anywhere now because you don't have to go into a centralized office all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I think that allows for companies to get a little bit more value because clients are looking for the best and brightest, which is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So us being able to hire outside of a box will allow us to more effectively consult with our customers, which means that, you know, they're going to be looking for speed and other areas. It's really the second point, that speed. I mentioned this earlier, but eliminating the need to travel out to client sites, coordinate huge meetings, it not only takes it not only takes that time away, but the money that's invested into getting resources out to meetings and running workshops can be put into other areas. So, you know, an extra resource to develop faster, or perhaps purchasing another technology. So, you know, consulting is going to, you know, consulting has adapted, I think, already. Most of the folks that I know that work for competitors have said the same thing. It's just everybody just kind of got on board right away of using virtual technologies for whiteboarding, for running workshops, recording sessions, using more collaborative tools like Microsoft Teams and Google. Yeah, I think it's just become, I don't think the face-to-face is ever going to go away. And definitely the handshake is still something that is not only like gratifying, but like it is still a way of doing business. I don't think that's ever going to go away, but I think the need for it on every single engagement, moving away to what we're at right now has really allowed us to, you know, be more responsive to our clients and to our, you know, like the well-being of our employees. So, you know, myself as an example, and a couple other folks, you know, we spend I mean, you're prime too, you know, we spend a lot more time with our kids because we're not spending, you know, for me, I'm not spending 10 hours on a plane to commute to work.
Yeah.
Or taking a train or whatever. So I think from a productivity standpoint, not from a client side, but from a consulting side and from our company, our employees' happiness is a little bit better. Now, I mean, everybody still wants to go to the pub, but
it is a really good point. Like if people are happier because the balance in their life is there and they're bringing that into their conversations with you. I've noticed it. I mean, you know, you a lot of the time, you know, you would meet people sometimes in meetings, and you know, people are having a bad day. They've had a horrible commute. They got a 2-hour train ride to get home. It's a factor. So no, I totally get it.
I mean, now it's just hitting a mute button for a minute to, you know, tell your kid, like, I promise I'll be done with this call in 5 minutes. You know?
Switch off the face and put your fist in there. So you talk about wanting the best and the brightest, and talent's a critical piece of building a great consulting organization and being able to create value for your clients. So looking at some of the different components on how you think about building a more agile team and business, and we talk a lot, as you know, in our research about what companies are doing to build an agile workforce. So what are some of the components of that for you in terms of how you think about growing Atlantic and making it into a more agile workforce?
I think a lot of it comes down to training and education and communication. So, you know, the ability to work in a more agile fashion. I mean, it's not always on, you know, I think pie in the sky, we would do it with every client. A lot of it comes down to educating our clients on what that actually means, because I think, you know, one of the benefits of Salesforce is that, you know, you can really quickly build anything on it. That's also one of the downfalls, is that you can just build something and keep iterating and iterating without having a gate. So
Yep.
The education piece is having a proper governance structure in place and working with the clients to really understand how much more disciplined developing and deploying in an agile fashion is, because you have to have people that are empowered to make decisions that, you know, that are working with a set of outcomes that, you know, everything is built against, you know, where you're not just like building to build, where every piece of criteria is put into play against, you know, a measurable outcome.
Yeah.
So if you're building X, it's because we're trying to achieve, you know, 5 minutes back in our day for our service reps to talk to other customers, or what, you know, whatever the case may be. Yeah, but it's and then communication, just from I think what we found in here, like having a workforce that's quickly and easily able to be agile, just with their own work and adapt. Communication has actually gone up. I actually feel like our team, like right now, and anybody that we've been bringing in, we have much more effective and frequent communication than we have in the past. Even when we were face to face in an office, which, you know, face to face in the office is great. There's a lot of banter and chit chat that happens, but that's also kind of detrimental sometimes, where it can take away from some of the effective communication and getting to the point. So from an agile standpoint, we've been able to move, I think, a little bit more quickly because we've been more effective at communication. We're hopping on calls a lot more often. We're having face to face, you know, more often. And the same with clients. There's no like, hey, let's wait like a week until we can find out if everybody can get there. It's almost like everybody's gone to, let's see if we can all get on the phone in the next half an hour.
Yeah.
You know,
and then you're scheduling your banter in the form of drinks or a quiz, or it's almost like you've got this productivity slot and then you can have a release.
And you have your, you know, your banter hour, and that's it.
With regards to, like, you're operating across a range of technologies and a range of industries, and I think the scrutiny on investments and spend, inevitably in this macroeconomic climate is much higher than it has been. Now, in your industry, skills and knowledge is such a critical element for your customers. How do you see that evolving, and or put another way, or like what to begin with, maybe what's the importance of it really from the client's perspective?
Oh, skills. I mean, it's I think that's our, I mean, we are going into clients to be not only experts in the technology, but also if you think about the things that make up a Salesforce implementation, you're starting to talk about governance, and not just project governance, but overall governance of how you keep Salesforce evolving and moving forward. Change management. So the way that communications go out about the platform, and training and education. You also have just people that understand process, not the technology, but sales process, service process, and that have had like experiences with other customers. So it's really challenging finding that right like mesh of skill set, because it's what the approach that we've taken is not, everybody has to be up to speed, certified, and an expert on the technology, depending on the role. But there are intangibles. So, the smartest person in the room isn't necessarily always the best person to go talk to a client. And so we are trying to find that mesh of, do you have the chops? Yes. And then from a cultural fit, sense of humor, and it is little things, like for us, like sense of humor. Are they a little bit self-deprecating? Are they afraid to get in front of a room of 5 or 6 people, like out of from the offset? So when we look at talent, the skill set it's a checkbox. They have to know Salesforce. So like for a solution architect, they have to have a certain number of certifications at a minimum. They have to have a level of experience with customers. But then when we go through the interview, we give them case studies that are very vague and ambiguous, And then they have to come back unbeknownst to them and present to, 5 to 6 people and walk us through it. That
Yeah.
we're going to have questions. And it's because that's oftentimes what happens with our clients. So it's us finding those right people. We actually built an application in Salesforce to help us manage that and grade and all that. As we use Precursive internally,
Yep.
but all of that then, as we bring resources on board, is related back to that, Precursive user.
Yep.
So that long term, when we start talking about their certifications and, this is the right person to lead a room, this person could talk to C-level executives and the like. That's those are things that we want to know as we move forward. So
yeah, it's pretty common now for the customers to be putting in automations where the work that people are undertaking, the type of technology that they're working with, the industry experience is all being automated and pushed into the profile of that staff member in Salesforce via Precursive. That's more and more common. I guess just a follow-on question around, so you talked about things like, the process, understanding process improvement, understanding change management. I think sometimes in some of these larger enterprise companies, they think they understand those things, but actually it's a bit more chaotic than one might hope. I'm curious to know, how do you actually actively train people on things like that, on process improvement, on change management with specific methodologies? Or is it you using a combination of things? How do you build up people's, because if you haven't worked client side, for example, if you haven't been a practitioner, if you haven't worked and delivered or done those projects internally in the vendor business, sometimes it's pretty difficult to kind of have that real world experience. So tell us about how you try and develop maybe some of those skills a bit more, if you don't mind.
I think so internally with customers, it oftentimes will depend on the level of maturity they have.
Yeah.
What we find in a lot of customers is that there is a governance framework in place, but as it relates to managing a technology like Salesforce, where you continue to iterate in a rapid fashion, they aren't necessarily set up to do that. So a lot of what we would do is go in and recommend approaches and why, recommendations on why it works, how it works, and then we will help guide them. And the same thing around the change management side. There's often pretty strong change management organizations and training organizations within, especially the larger mid-market to enterprise customers. But oftentimes it's a little bit of guidance around execution. So that's where our consultants will come in and help them with executing, actually putting a strategy together and execution of that. At the end of the day, it does become incumbent on our clients to actually, do a lot of that work.
Yeah.
And we're there to help guide them. I mean, we are, consultants, but without those values, like the value of the project is often lost. And I think from our side, it often feels like people look at it as a line item, and we embed it with all of our projects, everything that we can around change management and around governance, because typically when those aren't present, that's when you start to see projects fail. And so there's an education with the clients from the offset of why we include those services and how we help them execute on the strategy.
Okay, cool.
It's a very vague way of saying it, but
no, not at all.
It's often taken as that line item.
Yeah. No, I get it. With regards to, because you're constantly, day by day, you're mobilizing people both in your business and your customers' business, and therefore capacity, right? And your organizational capacity, your individual capacity to deliver is a very important component of any consulting business, and in fact for any customer, right? So in this new remote environment, how has capacity planning changed? And kind of backdrop to this question is, I remember a meeting with the head of operations for a services business, and he said, I know we've got a problem, because when I look over in the office, and at 5 o'clock, half of the office got up and left, and at 8 o'clock, the other half got up and left, and I knew I had a problem because I could see it. talk to me about kind of with this more distributed approach, does it make that capacity planning different, more difficult? What are you seeing there?
I think it's, if anything, I think it's made it a little bit more effective.
Mhm.
So we can look at it from resources on a page. So we can definitely tell, from an allocation standpoint on our side, where our shortfalls are, where we may need to hire more headcount,
Mhm.
which of our expert resources are, tied up if we're trying to sell, another deal. But it doesn't take out some of the human aspects of that resource capacity and really finding out how people are doing and checking their workload. So if anything, I think it's actually increased the amount of communication we have with our employees, and that's not only from our like head of delivery and head of consulting talking with all of their employees, and us talking, Fred and I talking to our direct reports, but I find myself reaching out to like our employees more, just really trying to understand how they're doing, where they're at with their projects, what's coming up for them. I think it's really helped
Mm.
in terms of it's kind of necessity is the mother of all invention, but it has really helped me from a communication standpoint try to get down to understanding really our resources bandwidth outside of numbers on a page, and understanding
Yep.
from a
Yep.
human level what their actual productivity is in a day. So
Yep.
um, it's been a little bit different to manage, because it's not just quick interactions at an office. It's really now turned into making sure that, because there's mental health stresses that have come with this for our employees, and making sure and checking in with them on that, because some of them don't have a family right with them. They might be living alone and
Yep.
going a little bit crazy, and
Yeah, they don't have outdoor space. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so
100%.
it's changed managing our employees in that manner, and then trying to say, okay, if there are other like mental health considerations we need to take, like what do we actually consider full-time capacity now? Because before it's an 8-hour day, but now it might be really it's kind of 6 hours is a full amount of capacity for someone in a given day.
Yep.
So
Yep.
and trying to figure out some of our employees work on multiple projects, and then really trying to figure out if it's half and half, is that really actually too much just in the current environment.
Yep.
I don't have a full answer other than if that's the way it is, other than in terms of managing it's checking in more with our employees, and trying to be more proactive in
Yep.
terms of how we take care of them.
No, I mean, I think that there is a formula emerging, right? In the sense that
Mm.
as you say, you've got an opportunity whereby you can bring people together maybe more easily. So therefore, that 2-week gap that you might have had between an interaction on a project because you're trying to schedule something, and then someone can't make it, and then you cancel it, and then it's another
Yeah.
2 weeks, and suddenly your project's delayed by a couple of weeks or 4 weeks or however long. And if you're able to pull stuff forward and deliver actually more work in less time, not only
Yeah.
timeline wise, but actually productivity wise, as you say, you can get it done in a shorter amount of time. But it's kind of balancing that against, as you say, like both the home life pressure, people, still with children at home, homeschooling, the pressure that comes with that. I think for some mothers who are bearing the brunt, frankly, the boredom that can come with that, because it is a grind, and then I think as you say, for those members of the team that don't have people around them, and all they're doing is working, right? I mean, so it's the nuances to all of this, I think, has tested people and companies like never before. Um,
Yeah.
um, so with regards then, finally, just kind of looking at like some tips for people to take away. So we're both working a lot with our customers who are working on and in and around the Salesforce platform. What advice would you give to people who are maybe earlier in that journey of Salesforce about how to think about how you can use Salesforce as a platform for growth?
Well, I think, I mean, for us internally, we use, and part of it is if we go out to a client, we like to be able to show how we actually use Salesforce in
Yeah.
our pitch, because it's actually helped us from what you'd expect, a sales and opportunity management aspect, but then also resource planning. And then, we're using Precursive for our timesheets, which
Yep.
feed into billing.
Yep.
And everything. So it can, I mean, using Salesforce as a platform, it really can be leveraged for, a huge variety of business functions. I think the best advice I'd have is really, and we do this with a lot of our clients, start simple. Like, don't try to figure out, and don't move over complex processes that, people haven't used or, are complaining about, because you're going to, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So where we go in is, there's, so if you look at a Salesforce sales process, see if this works for 80% and then iterate on top of that, and really, really make decisions that are based on achieving business outcomes rather than, hey, this is going to work for Bob.
It's always Bob, isn't it?
There's always a Bob.
Always a Bob.
But it's start small and iterate. I always look at it like, when I look at Salesforce no different than like some of the apps on my iPhone. So like I fly on, well, when we used to fly.
When you used to fly, yeah.
When I used to fly, I flew on United Airlines. I fly United Airlines, and that's just what I do. And the first iteration of the app, I could like check a flight and like book a flight, but it didn't have anything on there about my loyalty. I couldn't use I couldn't scan it at a gate, none of that. And it was the base amount of functionality I needed. And it iterated over time, and they continued to communicate with me on, here's what's coming in the next release. Here's what's coming in the next release. Salesforce is no different. You've got to establish that baseline, keep it simple for all intents and purposes, and then move from there. And that's, with a good governance structure in place, good communications and change, that's how you keep the platform clean and you keep people engaged with it.
Yeah. Simple does not mean simplistic, right? I think that's perhaps underappreciated.
That's right. It doesn't necessarily mean simplistic. It just means, literally take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, don't boil the ocean. Yeah,
and don't do
excellent. All right, thanks, Mike. Been great having you on. Final questions then. So, is this? Are you also then a budding musician, or is this the kids' music studio? We've got, what's that? Keyboard, drum kits, or is this where your wife?
The guitar, the two wooden guitars back there, my wife and I made as an anniversary gift back in, where were we? We were in like Shoreditch or somewhere like cool, and it was like a workshop where we got to like make our own guitars. It was cool. And then my kids play piano, and then I am a drummer.
Oh, excellent. All right. Well, maybe we can get a video follow up on that one at some point.
Maybe not.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. Been awesome having you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Jonathan.
Take care, man.
All right.